Chiquillo Spikes, 15-year NFL vet. I accomplished a lot, All-Pro, Pro Bowl. Probably known as one of the, it is an Iron Man, but one of the things that I'm proud of is to be able to have the longevity. Played for 15 years and one of only 5 linebackers that started in over 200 games. And so,
stunning accomplishment.
thank you. But just after football, felt unfulfilled. I still felt like I had to wake up and chase something. So I left school early as a junior, decided to go back to school, graduate. Still felt unfulfilled, went and got an MBA from Miami, graduated from Auburn, undergrad. So, and it really has led me throughout my times doing consulting work now. So the brotherhood is strong. That's the reason why I'm here. I'm Dr. Talisa's brother. So proud of that, proud of her. So
Thank you so much. Ricardo.
It's a pleasure to sit next to you, both of you, actually. But I idolize this guy. I've been watching him, his toughness and his grit, and it always brightens up my day to see him. But Ricardo Lockett, Seattle Seahawk 49er, 6 years in the league, 3 Super Bowls, retired now, entrepreneur and proud father.
Awesome. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Kira Dockery. I also have a name. It's spelled C-I-R-A. My mom is from Ireland and gave me a name full of vowels, so I feel your pain. It's pronounced Kira. And I'm a clinical psychologist. I am a suicide prevention specialist. I helped start a program called the NFL Lifeline, and I ran that for almost 10 years that I hope people know about. Before that, helped start the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, worked in various areas in mental health, but suicide prevention is where my passion is. And I should forget, I am also a family advisor on the Harvard Football Players Health Study because my father played in the league a million years ago when the New York Jets won a Super Bowl. That's how long ago that was. So he won a Super Bowl 3. So anyway.
So we're going to talk about mental and behavioral health. And this is, to me, as critical an issue as heart health and pain. Because if we don't have our own self, what do we have? And they are all interrelated. So I'm going to start by asking a couple of questions. The good Dr. Dockery, I'm going to turn to you. What are the treatment options for mental health? How can people start to think about certain things? Because when people leave the league, sometimes there's a big fall off and people get into what we talked about all morning, social isolation. Could you riff for that a little bit for that on us?
Sure. Some of it, treatment, there's probably the options, therapy, there's psychiatry, there's medication, there's a whole new world of psychedelic type treatments, which are hopeful, and it runs the gamut. I think from my perspective, it's also about kind of like, we don't always need treatment traditionally. I think of these guys transitioning out of the league and what a huge change, major life event that is. Identity shifts, loss of community, brotherhood, all of that. And it would be abnormal for you not to have some feelings, symptoms that look like depression, those kinds of things. I think what's more problematic that we've talked a lot about here is sort of the isolation that comes with that. If we normalize that, great. We can scoop you guys up. We can help you get through it, right? It's a normal life event. But right now, and culturally, there's a whole lot of isolation. That has been, when I was running the NFL Lifeline, that really was my mantra. I was like pounding the pavement to try and reduce isolation for a community where there was a huge amount of stigma, right? You guys are like big, tough men. You're supposed to not have any feelings, right? So isolation is a big risk factor for suicide. It's only increased since the pandemic for all of us. I mean, I remember specifically where I was when I first heard the term social distancing, and like my heart sunk, because as someone who works in this space, that now we are a big social experiment to see people who aren't even at risk for these types of kind of depression or transitions. Like social isolation is a huge risk factor for all sorts of mental health issues. So I hope that answered a little bit of your question. We can talk more about treatment as it naturally comes up too.
Yeah, let's do that. That was a phenomenal answer. Let me just bring out a point. Let's not talk about football players for just a second. Let's talk about social isolation, because people have a cohort of folks, their teammates, they drop off of that. That's really disconcerting. We learned from the pandemic, right? The pandemic, the liveliest part of people's life, 18 to 24, the depression rate in those people was 63%. Stunning. Imagine what happens to our guys when they leave their social construct on top of everything else. So I want to go to our players, both of whom are world-class, renowned individuals. Let's talk. What are ways players can emotionally support each other on the field and as they leave the league?
It's a lot of ways. The first thing is, how can you can't recreate what you always do inside of the locker room every day. When we play with each other, even though we're not blood brothers, but we consider each other brothers because we're around each other more than we're actually around our families.
Right.
And the continuous amount of time that you spend with each other inside of those locker rooms. So I would say, try to recreate that. And that's the reason why when we have things, events outside, especially like Super Bowl week, the reality of it, everybody wants to get paid and be compensated. But the bigger part of it that's very soothing for me to see is to be amongst the brotherhood of the guys, and you find whether or not if it's little pop-ups or we're intentional about seeing each other by, hey, let's put something on the schedule so all of us can show up and we can just kind of check in with each other, because I can't remember how John stated it earlier. He was sitting on the panel. Basically, how I took it is, you can never change anything unless if you are aware. And so you got to be present to have that awareness that comes behind it. And I think just from having those type of situations like that, I think that definitely helps.
That's brilliant. I want to follow up on the awareness issue for a second. Ricardo, other ways people can support each other.
Yeah, it's, I think I get a lot of calls. I get the random calls. It's a lot. So for me, I'll just explain my life kind of in a nutshell. I've kind of made some good investments, so I don't really work. So it causes me to stay in the house a lot. And the fact that I don't work, obviously I'm in the house. And therefore, I'm not motivated to work out because it's performance-based. And if I don't have a game Sunday, I have no reason to go to the gym Thursday and kill myself. So that puts me in a situation where I'm not working out. That puts me in a situation where maybe 6 days out of the week, I don't have contact with human beings. So I'm just isolated all the time. So being here actually it's like my vacation. It's like my therapy. It feels good. Even sitting next to him, it makes me feel relatable. So a lot of times my mom or my aunt or people who love and care about me, they can call and talk to me and tell me, oh, I wish you feel better, or I hope your day goes great, and this and that. But it's not the same conversation if me and Takeo spoke. It's more of a warrior speaking. It's more of a kind of like the military. When a guy leaves the military, a woman leaves the military, you have that bond with those soldiers because you've been in battle, you've done certain things. And yeah, this person is my relative, but we don't really have a bond. And when they want to call and talk to me, they just want to ask me about football. They want to either ask me about football money, or somebody right here doesn't believe that I'm your cousin. Tell them who you are. Yeah. Right. So
He wins.
right. So we missed that connection, and almost the only connection is those guys that were in the military with them, the guys that were there. So we just simply have to reach out to each other, and because like you said, we don't have emotions. So if I come in the house and my entire family's there and I fall, I don't cry because I'm the football player, because I'm the tough guy, you know. So I don't have those emotions, and I also don't have human contact. So being here, I appreciate you guys. This is my therapy.
So what these guys said was really brilliant. They brought up a couple of parallels. The military, especially special forces, looks almost exactly the same. We brought up awareness, and we're maybe not screening people enough. I'm going to turn to Rachel for a few comments on a number of those things. And then we talk about social connection and people having their social connection to their phone only, and that doesn't substitute for humans. So, Rachel, I want to bring up the elephant in the room, because you know me, I always will. So I've spent a while, you've spent quite a while studying head injuries. It is very clear that our population of interest is at significant risk for those over time. That's not questioned. There's not question that there is a risk for certain pathology. But what's the linkage to depression and anxiety? We both have done a little work in that space, and how do we start thinking about this proactively?
Okay, thanks, Ross. I was going to say that I think we know from patient populations and from players that there is absolutely an increased risk of depression and anxiety related to head injury, absolutely. And before I say anything else, I would say that those are treatable. That's one of the things we want to focus on, and one of the things we've been researching recently has been suicide and death by suicide and people who self-harm. And I think that what we want to put into context as we study players is that players are not like everybody else, in a sense, and we have to use special math to understand the risks because there is so much resilience built into the system. And so we know that actually players, professional athletes, are at lower risk of suicide than the general population. Bring that closer. Thank you. Pro athletes are at lower risk of suicide compared to everybody else. And when we looked at professional football players, basketball players, and MLB players, we saw that they shared that really low risk of suicide compared to everybody else around until 2010. And after 2010, what we saw was a 3 times increased risk of suicide in NFL players only, right? Now, there's a lot of factors there. That number's so big, 2 to 3 times more likely is huge. So we think there's a lot of factors going on. But we know that nothing changed about the games specifically in that time. We know that there was no rule change. People didn't stop wearing helmets. So what we're seeing is that players are absolutely at risk in a lot of ways for depression and anxiety, and those are the biggest risk factors for suicide. And yet, there is enormous resilience that we know that's built in there, and the question is really, how do we screen better? If players are only more recently at risk, how do we kind of turn those numbers back around and try to get everybody more connected? And this is where I turn to Keo, you, and I think Kira especially have been talking lately about peer-to-peer, and so I had a question for you both about how do players support each other in the kind of this big fear that's surrounding everybody these days?
Because if it's only happened since 2010, it should be intervenable.
That's the hope.
Right?
Yeah.
We should be able to do something.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, please.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
So you want me to say it quickly again, the question, so I make sure?
One second. This is what I think. I think since it's a new thing, I think it has something to do with social media. I think the expectation of a football player, I think the expectation of a NFL wife and an NFL girlfriend causes more stress. Where do you live? What do you do? What's going on? And now I'm not playing anymore. So now that I'm retired, it's maybe 3-4 times worse because now I'm still trying to uphold the image that I had as a rookie or when I got that contract my second year, when I got that 20 million, that 30 million. And now, blah, 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 do they still talk? And now it's like, I might as well don't be here because they don't even want to see me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Right. So it's in part need for screening, and it's in part the environment that has maybe changed as much as anything else. Right, guys? Dr. Dockery, how do people know about this? How do they know if they're depressed?
I mean, that's a good question, right? We think of depression and we think, oh, you're sad, right? A lot of these guys, and in general, men culturally, we don't socialize them to even recognize signs of sadness in themselves. So when I was first doing this work, when there was a lot less of wonderful guys like you talking about these issues, which we can get to, that's what we really need to be happening to save lives. But, we'd ask about some of the other more palatable symptoms of depression, which are, how's your sleep? Disturbances in sleep, appetite, weight loss. Those are things people will talk about where there's stigma around mental health. They'll start talking about those things. And sleep is a great temperature checker for all of us about our stress levels, about depression. But then for men specifically, rather than perhaps what we think of as hopelessness, sadness, it can look like anger, irritability. There are cognitive symptoms of depression. It is in the DSM, mild cognitive impairment. So memory issues, decision making, impulsivity, all of these things are, it's a very complicated web of symptoms. But I think loss of interest in things you used to love, that's a big one. And then, of course, the biggest, the isolation, the social withdrawal. Those kinds of things. So if those are happening, I mean, you're so aware you're alone a lot, right? It makes you worried about you. But you're aware of it, so you're on it. You're working about it. You're coming out to this thing. You're connecting. You're kind of seeing it, and you're going to intervene. I mean, this is such a great example of that's a risk factor, right? And you're noticing it and talking about it. So I hope that answers kind of how you might know. Risk factors for suicide are different, which we can certainly talk about in a little bit too.
Yeah, I think we should come back to that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a more complicated issue, right? Suicide, depression is a risk for suicide, but it's much more complicated than that. Much more complicated than that, right? Yes. And there is something, I'm going to let Rachel explain, which is we don't believe it maybe is the entire explanation. We're not saying that, but there is something called, if I see something, maybe it's socially acceptable to do what somebody else did.
Yeah, so I think what you're referring to is, as we think about risk factors for suicide, one of those is a high-profile suicide in your community. And what I've learned from Kira is that when a suicide occurs in a community, a death by suicide, and it's not told alongside stories of hope, of perseverance, of healing, it puts people in that community at risk for potentially being more vulnerable to doing something similar. And so I think one of the key pieces as a collective response to what feels like a crisis is to say, are we getting enough positive stories out there? Are we talking about ways that people dealt with depression and anxiety and came back from it? And I think that's what we're all hungry for as a way to hopefully pull that back down.
So focusing in on what people can do, active screening, resilience, fighting back, right? These folks have been, as I said in the beginning, the 1% of the 1% their entire lives. How do we keep them pushing forward, not to go into the negative, to push forward for the positive? So I think that's spot on. I want to ask another question, if I could. Let's talk about what are the ways that people might pick up, players, professionals, risk factors in people. How could we see that in another player, a friend? Because we talk about these social connection networks. Like if I want to stop eating fries, I hang around with people who don't want to eat fries, which I haven't obviously been very successful at. But if I want to get better at something, I connect with those who are a little bit more sticky at that kind of thing. How can we make those kinds of things faster? So, Ricardo, I want to turn to you and have you start and have others comment.
Sure. I think, like-minded rooms. Certain people you hang around. A lot of times, I talk to my friends, they say, oh, this is my best friend, this is my best this. But I say, is that really your best friend? Or is that your friend that you knew first from childhood? Is that your roommate from college? I like to think of my best friend. If you think of like, oh, what is your best this or that? It does something better than something else. You compare it to something else, but most of the time you don't compare your childhood friend to anyone else. So I create friend groups that create the best in me. I create friends that articulate well. I befriend people who are emotionally aware. Things that I need, things that help my life. So a lot of times people say, if you smoke, you'll hang with smokers. If I smoke and I don't want to smoke, I'm gonna hang with non-smokers only. So I think the hard part is maturing and choosing the best environment for yourself, no matter your career.
Other comments from the group? Okay.
Can you rephrase that question for me?
Yeah. So how can people sort of in some ways begin to recognize depression or risk or other things? Then we'll talk about questions. I think Dr. Dockery will ask how players can ask their health professionals. What are the kinds of prompts we could give that way? But how can we recognize that risk in each other, you know? My friend isn't doing as much. He won't go out. He won't go do that kind of thing.
Okay, it's just change of behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
Change of behavior. I give you a real life example. I got guys who, when you finish playing for the season and you come home, it's just certain things that you do that are non-negotiable. Like, we gonna go out and eat 3 days out of the week at a minimum. Like, I need to talk to you every day.
Perfect.
And I know at least one conversation out of the day is gonna be you just kind of expressing yourself and getting things off of your chest. And when you started seeing the change in behavior when you don't do the same thing, or stuff that comes off as naturally as a routine, it's always an excuse now. Or you isolate yourself, and it's like, yo, like, why you changing, bro? Like, what's going on? Like, change of the behavior. So, and the scary part is, I've had friends who don't know they are doing that, and they're depressed.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was one of them. Didn't even know.
Yes.
And it took me probably maybe 10 months to kind of figure it out. But I went through a 10-month time period to where I didn't do some of the same things that I typically would do. And you know, I found myself in isolation, but as working through it and you start to get back social and you hear the stories about guys going through some of the bad times and unfortunate times of suicide, you know, that really kind of made me aware. And then I made sure that I would definitely talk to my sister, you know, and talk to other guys that, you know, who I felt like I had something in common with, that we can share a bond.
I should add that, I mean, I want to give you both honorary PhDs because we did a whole research and training for how you can help somebody in crisis, not just here, and just training lay people how to do that. And the first thing that came up is the first warning sign is they're acting differently. Like, that's it. They're not their usual self. So we have a gut feeling at times when, like, our buddy is more silent on the text thread or whatever it might be. But I think, you know, these symptoms, mental health issues, you know, they creep up, they creep in, right? So in my work, in prevention work, it was how can I equip everyone around that individual to notice and then know what to do? So, you know, training former players, this community, to kind of be able to identify warning signs that someone's struggling, be able to have that conversation and not be kind of afraid about having it, which I totally understand. And then knowing where, like, you're going to be the hand that's going to hold them to the help. You're not going to be the help when someone's really struggling. And I think that's really important when we talk about peer-to-peer support, and making sure, you know, our community knows what the supports are out there, and really have a group that feels confident about talking to their community about these issues.
So it makes sense if you notice something, if you see something, it's simple. Say something, right? And then guide them maybe towards a provider. But when they get to that provider, it's one thing when you go to people who've been trained or who spend a lot of time in this area, and it's another thing with the majority of the country, let's be honest, who don't recognize the risk in players. So some thoughts about questions, I think for the whole group, that players can approach their doctors with to screen for mental health related issues. We touched on a little bit of that when we said what are the signs and symptoms, but where's some real direct kinds of screen things? Rachel, you.
I think that one of the things that we're finding from our work, and this showed up today in all the panels, is that the guys who have played have a lot of conditions that are going to cause some cognitive problems, like depression, like you said, high blood pressure, sleep apnea. My fear, or our fear, is that they are going to assume those are the signs of something scarier, that it's going to start to feed into fears about long-term brain health. And so we want folks to get screened for depression. But when it comes to football players, even before that, can they take the checklist? Can they get screened for their sleep apnea? Can we kind of get ahead of all the different conditions that might trigger players in a way they might not trigger somebody else, and get those treated? Because I think we want to just go so much farther upstream to get at this problem, because this is a unique population with a unique set of risks.
So I would buy that 1,000%. We might say that there are a lot of physical factors and treatable things that could influence mood on top of the trauma that people took. That could be the pain we talked about for a long time. Frankly, that could be not getting enough exercise. That could be isolation. That could be sleep apnea. That could be a lot of things related to that. And so let's get into some things that are a little rougher, because this is more of a heavy session. What are the risk factors for self-harm or suicide that we might see? And Dr. Dockery, I'm going to let you hit lead off.
Take that one?
I'll let you hit lead off, and
No,
maybe we'll all collaborate with you.
I mean, this is important, and like I was just saying, you know, it's you guys who are around your community the most who are going to notice these kinds of, signs that someone's struggling, right? We break it down into two. There's risk factors, right? And then there's warning signs. So if you just look at risk factors in the population, previous suicide attempt is the number one risk factor. Then we get to diagnosis of depression or other mental health issues. Then we get to chronic pain. So chronic pain is a big risk factor for suicide. I should say, being male, unfortunately, I guess we could characterize it that way. But, men die by suicide between 3 and 4 times the rate as women. So 70 to 80% of suicides are men. And there's a lot of, we can tease that apart. Women experience suicidal ideation or attempt at twice the rate of men. So it comes down to that men use more lethal means, so they're more likely to not survive an attempt because of how they do it. But I also, women are more likely to ask for help. They may have the attempt and then call and ask for, because women, it's more allowable culturally for women to do that. So I want to, sort of say that, again, the isolation, but, suicide is way down the line. There's a lot more we can do before that, but those are sort of like the risk factors in some ways. And, go ahead, jump in, please.
Carter.
I was listening, but I will go. So for me, I've been through some traumatic stuff, and you guys got me actually thinking, am I depressed? But I was thinking I was lucky to be at the house. Yeah. So I was thinking my isolation was good.
Whoa.
It's
Totally.
right. It's like, you're isolated, you change, bro. It's like,
be.
sometimes you have to take the, if your depression thing, and, sometimes guys are rougher when they're alone, and, the social distance. I was like, wait a minute, am I crazy? Am I depressed? But I don't think I am, because I'm the one that talks to my friends.
Yes.
I'm the one that keeps myself away from other people so that I keep a certain mind frame and I'm not affected by people that aren't like-minded. And so I will go back and I'll tell you a story about probably one of the toughest times of my life. Actually, it was the toughest time of my life. It was 2014, this ring that I'm wearing. It was first down, fourth quarter, 43 seconds left, 2-yard line, Patriots versus Seahawks. We're coming out of the huddle.
Run the damn ball.
We're coming out of the huddle, and we're both just everybody, the whole huddle. We're looking at each other like, okay, here we go. You know, you take a deep breath and you look each other in the eyes, and it's like, let's go. It's like no matter what happens, like we're doing this. And Russell comes in, gets on a knee, and he calls the play. I think it was like double stack, slant or something like that. And he called opposite. So usually I'm the guy that's blocking, and opposite means wherever you lined up, you switch with that person. So now I know that he's going to throw me the ball. And this could possibly go really well, or it could go really bad. But on that day, I just appreciate the opportunity. I just took a deep breath. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't anything. And then it just didn't go our way. And I can visually see myself on my knees. I can see the Patriots running around. I can see Malcolm Butler with the ball in his hand. I can see all of that. And it took me that entire night and the next day. I think I cried the entire time. And I'm not a crier. To be a warrior, to be amongst other warriors, you know what it would take for me to start crying in front of Tikio and my guys? It'll be a lot. But I just couldn't control it. I couldn't stop it. And I'm not exactly sure what I did to get over that. And that makes me think about the isolation part. So did I just forget it, or did I do the work to get over it? And when I got here this weekend, I had an interview yesterday with the sports psychologist from Seattle at that time. And I could literally talk to anybody in the room about it. But then it was like talking to my mom. It's like when you had a tough day or a rough day and your dad or your mom comes in and say, "Are you okay?" And then you just turn into a bag of water. And then, so it made me think, like, am I really over it? And to be here and to talk about it over and over and over and over, and see it on the news when I walk in the hotel, to see it in the room when I go in there, and it's just it's like a reminder of the day that someone that you love died. And I hope nothing, and I wish nothing more for the Seahawks to win 47-0. I think that would be the therapy I need, for sure. So,
But I want to congratulate Ricardo for having the bravery to have that kind of discussion with all of us. That's guts. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
tough times.
I think the other thing, I'm just sitting over here and just kind of going back through the reason why I know a lot of people, I got a lot of responses before I even showed up, especially from guys that played the game, some are in the room, is, try to articulate, what really causes that state of depression, especially when you leave the game. And that happens. I share my story. Like, one day at practice, I remember I threw my back out. And this happened in, I remember in, 2007. And over the years, it's just, people know when you play in the game, it's like continuously being in a car wreck every time.
Yeah.
And then the crazy part is, well, you got to get stronger in the off season. You got to stay strong during the season. Now you're putting all of this weight on your back, squatting down, compressing your spine and everything. And so for years, I retired in 2013. And for years, I had to deal with back problems. And it wasn't up until a year ago, I got to the point of me telling the depressed story. I had to go and have surgery. And I did not realize the pain that I went through every single day. I normalized it. And I felt like that's just the way I'm supposed to feel.
Right.
Until you get around other people and
Right.
you start complaining, and they was like, damn, man, when you gonna get that taken care of?
Yeah.
And those remarks actually came from my sister. She was like, you complain about it, double-digit years now. And so when we talk about depression, but to put a bow up on that, it got to a point to where, like, I couldn't do anything. Like, my quality of life suffered.
Right.
And on a daily basis, I usually eat clean. You know, I like my sweets, but I eat clean for the most part. I don't overindulge in anything, love to eat fish. And so I'm going to the doctor, and my levels are high. And I'm like, how are my levels high? And it's because of the pain that I was in that I did not know. But because I had somebody pushing me to go to the doctor, because I had somebody interpreting what they see versus just me looking at it and it's like, I think I played football. I'm supposed to feel this way. That was that accountability. And so when I think about what causes that state of depression, it's the little things that compound over time. When I see my NFL brothers and I see them limping, or I see them to where they want to do anything like a simple activity, like just going out playing golf. They got on knee braces, ankle braces, back brace, and it's like, bro, at some point we gotta get this worked out. Let's talk about what we need to do. And then, you know, the old adage, men don't like going to the doctor. Well, black men don't like going to the doctor anyway. So, you know, I think that's a big contributor to the state of like our guys just going into depression. And the more that we can show better examples and talk about, hey, you really don't have to live like this because like it's 2025. I know everybody's saying you have back surgery, you ain't gonna be able to do this, and I know this person. No, man, it's 2025. So
6.
Well, that's right.
you're right.
We gonna give him the pass.
Wait, and to piggyback on that, while you're playing, you can't tell the doctors.
Right.
There's no doctors
That's
to tell.
a brilliant point, Ricardo. You can't say anything.
No.
Right.
Because they will put on your next contract that he has knee problems, he has back problems.
Right.
So now we can't sign you for 4 or 5 years
That's
because
right.
you're injury prone. And not to mention, while you're still on the team, I can't say that my leg hurt because they're gonna say Rennie Curry go in the game. And if Rennie Curry goes in the game for me, I may never play again. So the fact that my hamstring is almost torn, this and that, I'd rather just take the Toradol and then just deal with it 2 days later.
I think you're saying something really that I really appreciate. One of the phrases I heard once is the training is the trauma. You guys are trained and selected because of your impervious to pain, because of the toughness, and all that stuff is just built into you and reinforced, and your success depends on it. And then things change, and all the stuff that was adaptive, I think, is now maladaptive. And so in some ways, the training is the trauma. You guys, all the stuff that made you incredible on the field can sometimes sequester or isolate or change how you experience it after. To expect someone to turn that off right away seems like a really tall task.
It seems super hard. Let's talk about that in summary, because I think we heard some really brilliant comments, right? Pain and depression are intimately linked together. They're not distant cousins. They live in the same house. That's number one. Number two is our gentlemen are selected. They told you the story. They're able to tolerate pain that almost no one else can. And then pain also makes you a little bit more disinhibited, willing to do something, anything to cope with that pain. So all of these things are not separated, and it's the lifestyle that allows you to do the work that when you leave isn't necessarily good for the rest of society.